Hello everyone, is the Prophet Michael David, aka Aries, and today is the first video where I'm going to start elaborating on all of the claims I made in my Raphael's Horn video from April 5th, 2023, earlier this year, where I claimed to pretty much be every end times prophet. And we're going to go from west to east. So today we're going to start out with the Native American end times prophet, and in the title, obviously, ETP, that's what it stands for. That is the wiki page for the Pahana, the Native American end times prophet. Actually, it's specifically the Hopi end times prophet, but that's who I'm claiming to be. All right, before I begin, just one quick thing. There's a couple things that are unique about the Native American end times prophecy compared to the other ones. Number one, all the other claims have to be pretty much taken on faith and signs and attributes of whatever prophet that religion describes. But the Native American one not only has that, but the prophet, the Pahana, also has to have a singular item and two items if they're really good, and I am. And so there are physical constraints to this prophecy as well. So here we go. According to Hopi prophecy, and this is negating all the stuff that he's supposed to know or do, there are three basic constraints to show, I guess, who the true Pahana would be. One is physical, and then you have the two items. Okay, the physical one is pretty easy. It is prophesied that the Native American end times prophet, the Pahana, will be white. And I got that covered in spades. There are other interpretations. He's called the long lost white brother or something like that. There are other interpretations in some Native American cultures, including, I think, the Hopi. They have abnormally high rates of people with albinoism, people without any skin pigment whatsoever. So no matter what your nationality or ancestry is, without pigment, everyone looks white. Everyone's seen a person that has albinoism, that has no skin pigment. So that's the only other interpretation. But mostly, most Native Americans that know about the prophecy would say, yeah, he's probably going to be a white guy. All right, and now the cool part. According to Hopi prophecy, the Pahana has to have certain physical items, one in particular and one's like a bonus. And I have both of those. And I keep them in this wood box that I've had for over 40 years, which isn't part of the prophecy, but it is now. I'll explain where I got it. It's got a wooden lid and everything that has broken over the years, but I've had this for over 40 years, and I'll explain it right now. Okay, again, the wood box isn't really part of prophecy, or at least nothing that I've ever read. Maybe you guys will read some prophecy about how the end times prophet has to have a wood box, but it's contained the two items for as long as I've had them, one for much longer than the other. But I'm going to tell you the story about how I got the box. So when I was really young, about 2 years old, the first house that we ever lived in was in Huxley, Iowa. And both my parents were young. My mom was 21 when she had me. My dad was 23. So they were young parents. And my dad was refinishing part of the basement in this house to increase the resale value when they finally sold the house. A lot of people have done that before. And so while he was working to refinish the basement, I would sit on the floor and play with toys. And I was really young, about 2 years old, so I do have some memories of some things, but not of other things. But I do remember this. So when he was done finishing the basement carpet and the trim, he had extra 1x6 scraps and extra trim scraps. And I was sitting right there, and he asked me if he would like me to make him, or if I would like him to make me a box that I could put my toys into, or something like that. And I said, yeah, of course. And so that's when my dad, it's just basically trim, oak, I would guess, and a 1x6 on the bottom. And he glued it together with wood glue, but then he gave it to me and I kept my toys in it. And then later, as I got older, I kept, baseball cards and other trinkets. I was never that much of a, gatherer, but I did collect some things. And yeah, that was when I was about 2, and I'm 45 now, so I've had it for 43 years. I've always had it, and kept it in pretty good condition, except for the little bit where some of the lid broke off. But that is the story of the box, the non-prophecy part of this that is now, I guess, part of the prophecy. But now I'll start talking about the items. Okay, the first item is actually the least important, the bonus one and everything. And that is this. Okay. What it symbolically is that Hopi prophecy and some other native prophecy says that the end times prophet, the Pahana, along with the item that I'm going to show you next, also must have an item of turquoise and silver. And both items have to have a story that links the Pahana to the sky gods and the earth gods and or the Native American people themselves. So now I'm going to tell you the story of this watch with the turquoise and silver band and how I got it. One more point, real quick, just because I didn't want to edit it. The turquoise and silver in Native American culture represent water. So it represents the water world, the age of Aquarius that we just came out of, which everybody but me and you guys knows that has already passed. Now we're in the age of Azrael, the age of fire. But that's what the turquoise and silver represent, is the water world, the current broken world that we're living in, or that we were living in. Okay, the story of where I got the watch. Just as this wooden box was made for me by my father, David, his father, my grandfather, was named Kenneth, and he was a Libra, and he worked for the Iowa Department of Transportation for a very long time. And they both were born and lived in Colo, Iowa, which is a very small rural town. Look it up if you want to. It has not changed for 100 years. And there is a Native American reservation that's very close to Colo, and those Native Americans are the Meskwaki. And while I don't remember any stories from my grandfather, my father told me stories that, small town Iowa people and Native Americans didn't really get along any better than Native Americans and, settler Americans anywhere else in the United States. And they fought a lot, never with guns, rarely with weapons, but he did tell me about stories where they got into a lot of fistfights. And I'm sure my grandfather's generation was no different. But the weird thing about him wearing this for as long as he did, and I asked my grandma about it, and she told me that she thought that he got it at his 40th anniversary, 40 years working for the DOT. They gave him a plaque and everything. But I don't think that's when he got it, because I remember him wearing this for as long as I can remember, even when I was a little kid. And then interesting point to make right here about my grandfather, Kenneth, was he was a Libra. He was a man of very few words, but he was an honest man, and he did not do things spitefully. So I don't think he would wear this Native American symbol just to spite the Meskwaki or any other Native Americans. And also, just to reiterate on this point, when they did retire, my grandma and my grandpa, they went down to New Mexico. And whenever I visited them, they always had a habit of picking up, art stuff to hang on walls or anything. And their favorite art was always Native American. So there was something about my grandpa, both my grandpa and my grandma, but especially him, that he was fascinated with the Native American culture. And like I said, he was not a spiteful man, but he wore this on his wrist for many, many years. And he died a couple of years, he probably died 7 years ago, a couple of years before my parents. And this passed on to my father, David. And then when he passed, it passed on to me. And I've kept my turquoise and silver, my grandfather's watch, in my box ever since that day. And that's the story of the watch and how the Pahana came to his turquoise and silver. And lastly, and most importantly, as weird as this is going to sound, Hopi prophecy states that the Pahana must also have a stone or a rock, and even more so, that stone or a rock must look like it is bleeding. And I do. And this is it. Kind of hard to tell with the camera, but it's in some way metamorphic, and it does look like it's bleeding black, like it's been shot or bleeding a bit in a few places. But just like the watch, it can't just be a stone. It has to be a stone that connects the Pahana with the sky gods and the earth gods, and or the Native American people themselves, and it has to have a story to it. And so here's the story. All right, here we go. In my last 2 years of high school, my junior and senior year, in the summer thereafter, my brother and I, who was about a year and a half younger than me, would go on a week-long trip with our two uncles from my mother's side. It was kind of like a guy's bonding trip because I was going to be going to college soon. So we did it my junior and senior year. Junior year, we had this pull-on camper and we went to Colorado. Cool trip, but not part of the story. Senior year, my uncles had this deal with some guy that he knew that we would drive his Winnebago from Iowa all the way down to Phoenix, Arizona, and then fly back. But we got to use the Winnebago for the trip. Problem was that we broke down in Colorado Springs, Colorado, for a few days, and they had to repair the Winnebago, and so we were behind time as we were going out west towards Phoenix. And we'd already planned to stop at the Grand Canyon, so we did, but we weren't going to be able to stay that long. Okay, quick segue, because it's important, and this is the part that connects me to the sky gods and earth gods. I just turned 18, and while I was a reader, I was into mostly, young person science fiction, fantasy, Star Wars book, Tolkien, some other stuff like that. But I had really never got into adult books yet. But I needed a book to read because we had a Winnebago and we had plenty of space. And so I wanted a book to read as we drove all the way down to Phoenix, Arizona. And I looked at my father's library, and he was a very good reader as well. And I picked out this book. And this book is Cosmos by Carl Sagan. And it's such a weird book. It's like textbook size. It says copyright 1980, so it might have been published, but it's got huge, waxy pages and everything, and all these old school photographs, and I was just enthralled by the book. Like I said, I'd been into young science fiction and fantasy for a while, but I'd never really, and I'd taken physics both junior and senior year, so I liked physics, but it was the first time I'd been introduced to so many different concepts about the universe that I'd never even thought about before. And so I basically read through the entire book on the drive down to the Grand Canyon. And that's where the story's going to start again. So my uncles and my brother and I, we stop at the Grand Canyon because we planned to go there, and but we were behind time, so we didn't get to stay very long. And for all of you that don't know, the Grand Canyon, yes, that is Hopi territory. That's where the Hopi Rock is. You can look that up as well. We're going to talk about that later, but just not in this video because I'm running out of time. But so we're short on time. I just remember the four of us standing there looking at the Grand Canyon. And again, there's a longer joke to this, but don't have the time for it now. And so the four of us are just standing there, and then my uncles are like, okay, well, we got to get back on the road because we're still a ways away from Phoenix, Arizona. And just in that moment, I kind of wanted a keepsake because it was beautiful. We just had to leave. And I remember looking down to my right and seeing this weirdly shaped rock that seemed like a different color than everything around it as well, but it had a different color, a different texture. It just looked really cool and weird. And so I ran over and grabbed it and picked it up and I put it in my pocket. And then we took it to Phoenix, and then we flew home. And then once I got back home in Iowa, I, you know, I put it in my wood box, and I've had it in there ever since. And I didn't realize what it was until I became a prophet. So that is the story of how I got my rock. All right, I think I did that pretty well. I'm a little bit over time, but not too bad overall. The only other thing I would like to talk about, and you guys can read about this, but the whole red thing today, that's also, I'm very good at my job and everything, because the Pahana is from the tribe of fire, and the rock represents one of the sacred objects that was given to the whatever the 5 tribes or 4 tribes for the elements. Again, look it up if you're interested, but yeah, tribe of fire. So signing off, as always, rule number 1, do not touch each other without another person's consent, aka do not hurt each other. And rule number 2, it's all about honesty, lies are a tick down, aka try not to lie. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.